Uh, I would like to just rearrange the question so that we have more context to what we're talking about, right? There are only two kinds of companies. One, you can actually take in external capital to grow. The other one, you are actually having factors which not favor you from taking external capital growth. So these two are the fundamental, trajectories. What you need to look at it. Today, look at companies which might not really look like a fancy tech startup or even a startup. Companies like Third Way Cafe, Third Way Cafe, I believe, is raising millions of dollars to actually fuel their growth. This doesn't mean that a coffee shop can actually go and raise capital. This definitely doesn't mean that, right? On the other hand, if you look at companies today, which are heavily focused on tech, are still not able to raise capital. Predominantly because I would always look at three factors. One, I would look at what am I betting on? Like, is it the founder or is it the technology, right? And between these two categories, if I don't find anything interesting, then it is automatically fall into the bucket where factors do not favor you for investments. The second category is, listen, you've been there for some time and you have captured majority of the market, and if someone else starts fresh, they're not going to grow as fast as you're growing, and ideally you have a kind of a barrier to entry, or you're artificially creating entry for other companies to come in. And these two factors typically classifies you whether you want to take the growth path by taking external capital, or you just take your customers' cash or be bootstrapped for a longer time and then do your job. I think that's how I categorize. I don't still fall into the fall for the definition of startups. I don't think you can define it anytime soon, so that you can start using a rule engine and then classify companies. I don't think that's going to happen.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, I more than agree. So, for example, startups, this startups as a word is being, used very often, right? Like a large company like Geo calls themselves as a startup. So many times people get confused about it. And if there is no disruption, probably it doesn't quantify as a startup.
So I beg to differ. You can so startup is the most abused word today, right? Anyone who launches a company, they go and tag themselves as doing a startup, right? And I don't have any problems doing that. The only problem comes is I see a lot of founders, pitching, and then when I say that, listen, this doesn't really look like a fundable business plan, they go completely offensive. So Geo or Geo Financials calling themselves a startup, I think the way they call themselves is predominantly because there is skating ability, and the factor which I was talking about, like a market player coming and doing what they're doing is going to take a longer time. There are barriers to entry to what they're doing right now. So there's still a very profitable or very lucrative opportunity in terms of a VC size.
Got it. Got it.
Yeah, certainly. First of all, good evening, everyone. Thanks for having this conversation here. I think given what we have been seeing over the last 18 odd months, I think this is a very pertinent conversation to have. So thank you for that. So I mean, following through what Swarup said on startup versus SME. I mean, I completely agree with this point on there being no thumb rule to classify a startup versus an SME, and there are definitely no sectors. We should say this is a sector which is probably venture fundable, because the fundamental driver is technology, versus calling a services company which has probably no component of technology as something that's a SME or a non-fundable startup. Definitely, that's not the right way to classify companies. Probably one I would say is the mindset of the founder itself. Right, what does the founder want to achieve? And great example was actually Third Wave Coffee. Third Wave Coffee is definitely not the first coffee chain to come up in India. In fact, it is going up against some of the strong incumbents, right? Well, Coffee Day today is in a different position. Definitely, they have a great presence, and Starbucks is expanding. The multiple coffee chains in India has always been, right. So, the idea is, what is your ambition, right? And how quickly do you want to grow into that, the position that you are envisioning for yourself? And secondly, can capital help you in achieving that within the time frame that you are anticipating? These are probably your two broad proxies that we can use to say that is the founder ambitious enough, and can money solve for what he's attempting to solve? If these two are probably being met, then I would say that that is a startup which is fundable by the kind of money that we are speaking about today, that's venture money, right? Rather than an SME, which is probably also servicing the same market, but probably a five shop coffee chain, which is attempting to grow at the same pace as an economy, or slightly more, like doing a 10-15% growth year on year, right? So that would probably qualify under an SME. That's broadly how I'm seeing. And when we are defining this, obviously, because you're growing so fast, at the same time, you may have a very different economics compared to the five shop coffee chain, right? So that is the problem that external capital providers are attempting to solve for you, right? So that's how I'm looking at the distinction between SMEs and startups.